Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, September 19th developer call for IPython project Jupyter. We are following an agenda in Dropbox paper, and that should be linked within the chat if you want to follow along. And the beginning of the agenda is a recap of something that's always in there, weekly news by organization. Feel free to click through on the links to check in on the various sections or organizations or projects that within Project Jupyter. I don't think Matthias is on the call to talk about IPython, but if he joins later, we'll go back to that section unless anyone wants to answer his question or type notes into his question within the agenda. Feel free to go ahead and do that.
I think Thomas
as far as documentation,
and
Thomas, you want to talk about IPython? Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you.
So it was just the one thing about it seems that the latest release of IPython broke passing base64 encoded data into the display image thing, which I didn't know had ever particularly worked, but the notebook tests were using it, so it must have worked before. And the notebook tests are now failing because of that. So we have to decide whether we want to make that work again and do another quick release of IPython or change the notebook tests to not rely on that.
Yeah, I suspect the notebook tests are. Can you put a link to the issue in there?
Thomas, are you talking? Because we can't hear you if you are, or no?
You're still mute.
Got it. I see the link in there. Yeah, it's okay. Thomas, it looks like you also put a comment within the within the notebook section. Do you want to talk about that? Moving on to the next section, since we're skipping over. Jessica's not on the call today or unable to join.
Yeah, so we finally managed to get Notebook 5.1 out after many weeks of release candidates, and we're starting to merge things for 5.2. One of the bigger changes that's there at the moment sitting in a pull request is the addition of our first translation. The framework for the translations was added in 5.1, but there were no translations actually there using it. And somebody has come along and done a Chinese translation for us. And now we just need to figure out how it all actually works to make it use that.
Well, that's exciting. Nice. All right, Darian, you want to go ahead and talk about, or anything you want to share about Jupyter Lab?
Yeah, so there isn't too much to report this week, partly because we've had a couple illnesses and partly because we're just addressing some beta issues. But one thing I did want to ask about, or maybe just warn about, because NPM packages support Semver in a fully compliant way, in a way that the Python packages don't, the dependency of Jupyter Lab on the Python Jupyter Lab launcher package, basically, if we want to change the structure of URL for a REST call, we might end up in a situation where a backward incompatible change is introduced. And that's happened just now. And the way we're dealing with it is by having a branch just in the code where we're supporting both. So it's backward compatible by supporting the old version for some number of versions, and then we can stop supporting that. But but I wanted to just ask, is there an established strategy for when you run into a situation where the problem is that the Python package dependency is basically, x is greater than equal to something, but what we really want is not just that it's greater than equal to something, but that when you hit the next version, it's no longer compatible. So we have to box it in, but all the previously released versions that said greater than equal to have the potential to break. With Jupyter Lab, because it's pre 1.0, we can basically say, look, at some point soon, if you have, say, version 0.31 of Jupyter Lab, it will just simply not be okay for you to try to run 0.27. But once we're past 1.0, this might be an actual real issue, and we might have to start having things in the backend services that support deprecated calls. That doesn't seem nice, but it's not today's problem. So I just kind of put it out there, and hopefully maybe we can somehow avoid this when we're past 1.0. It's just a thing that occurred because it's directly biting me now, and I kind of wanted to put it out there, partly because if someone has a smart solution already at hand, I'd be happy to hear it. But if not, at least we're aware that this sort of discrepancy can occur because we have two different versioning paradigms. That's it.
Okay. Any comments on that from anyone, or should we move on? Okay, so we're skipping over widgets and NB format. I don't think either Jason or M are on the call. And services, Peter, do you have an update you want to share on that?
Yeah, just one note that someone opened an issue on Kernel Gateway to start a discussion about moving some of the features from that to the notebook project proper. So if you're interested in that topic, please chime in. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Min, do you want to talk about Jupyter Hub?
Yeah, plugging along toward a release. We just released 3.0 of the proxy, and I'll cut a release candidate of Jupyter Hub 0.8 as soon as this meeting is over. And there's been a lot of work pushing, testing the new version of Jupyter Hub from various directions on Binder and various institutional deployments. So I think 0.8 is going to be in pretty good shape when it's finally released.
Okay, great. Kyle, you want to talk about Interact?
Yeah, sure. So the desktop app is coming along. Some of the major blocking features for us for beta, like properly closing, prompting to save on close, now occurs very naturally within the app. I'm hoping that we can make another release soon, based on that. And then I've been working on a server extension for Interact. It's exactly the same web app, but it runs on top of the Jupyter Notebook server. It actually uses some of the same kind of setup that Jupyter Lab does, but it keeps the URL paths. And then Vega and Vega Lite are going to be built into the next Hydrogen release. So we're at least supporting those MIME types, and we'll probably go ahead and target both kind of flavors, the whole Vega Lite 2, Vega 3, and Vega Lite 1, Vega 2, whatever the numbers are. And then we have this lingering PR for Hydrogen to upgrade Jupyter Lab services. I don't know if we need to, but it'd be cool if somebody looked at it from Jupyter Lab. I linked it in the document itself, but that's pull request number 908. It's literally just a Greenkeeper PR, but none of us are using the remote kernels, but it uses Jupyter Lab services directly. And that's it.
Okay. All right, great. So before we move on to kind of closing out the meeting, is there anything else that isn't on the agenda that anyone wants to cover or discuss with the group or present to the community? No?
I forgot to talk about VDOM,
Oh,
which was a Python lib.
yes.
I could actually give a demo too if people wanted it.
I think we have
Would
plenty
people
of
want a
time.
demo? Then I will give a demo.
Yeah, and by the way, my UI is frozen, so I can hear you, but I can't see you or interact with you. I don't think this will cause any issues. I just want to give you a heads up.
All right, let me.
Sure to give a very exciting description of the demo you're doing, Kyle.
Make sure to give a very good description. And now I'm clicking a button.
So just like
so this got brought up.
Good. Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to ask some technical details, but I think you're about to explain it.
So it's also linked in a Jupyter Notebook BR with the full spec and schema. So this was brought up during the Jupyter Dev meetings, which was like a declarative JSON format for HTML rendering. So when I say VDOM, it doesn't really have to be VDOM because you could do the same thing with just like document.create element and then kind of watching what you're doing. So I guess I'll just share one app. You are sharing Electron. I don't know how much of the screen it shows. Can people see things?
Yep, we see your whole desktop.
Oh, okay, that works then. Sweet. Okay, and you can see this document. So it's literally just it's the special MIME type that you can specify the tag name as well as all the attributes that go with something, and then the children, any elements that go below it. And what that comes down to, so I'm going to skip a couple ahead here. I'm going to find this one, this one. Let me run some code real quick. I shouldn't have ran that one. Here we go. Okay. So basically what this comes down to is you can make these nested views. I mean, it looks a lot like you would end up writing with HyperScript or a lot of the JavaScript style, like make an element piece, and effectively you'll do VDOM, div, and you can just make an array of children. And then this gets passed over as a full JSON thing. So if I do if I just run this by itself, you can see it's literally just attributes children, attributes tag name, and it's just one big JSON payload. The reason that this is useful is to make things that do updates that keep state. Because if I try to do the same code but use the display updates against HTML, and so here I'm using a marquee element, and when as it's scrolling, it ends up getting reset as the code's running through. And if I do that with this VDOM one, it changes the text nodes underneath instead of changing the like wiping it completely off of the DOM. So that's that for those. That's about it. So the main reason I care about this is to make things like collapsible job progress views. So the one I show down here. So I can run this and the user can toggle it and it keeps state. So as they're running, even if they've kept it open, it doesn't kind of flap. Because if I do this with the regular HTML one, it'll create a new element. It'll be really obvious to the user that things are changing on them. So that's about it. And so if I do this one, this is importable as a library too, but not really fully fleshed out. So if I do vdom.p, okay, and that's it. There we go.
What about event handling?
No event handling. So on purpose, I wanted to do something super basic to send from Python, but it's not going the way of the widgets. So it's literally just a kind of like a layout.
Cool. I like this. I think it's a good idea. Would be pretty easy for us to implement on the Lab side as well. So
yeah, and then so there is a PR open for the notebook. but I haven't finished it the way that I'm hoping to get it done, so that the display updates aren't thrashing with it. Min gave me an idea of what I can do, but I'm going to end up having to change a bunch of APIs for how we append output. But yeah, look forward to that in Notebook. But yeah, Jupyter Lab should be able to implement this. The spec is declared somewhat reasonably inside the Notebook PR, but I've also there are flow types for this in Eteract, so you could also look at those. I'm happy to link either one. So I'll put them in the Dropbox, all the links.
Cool.
Great. Anything else, Kyle?
No, that's it.
Okie dokie. All right, so we have a list of conferences and workshops within the agenda. If there's anywhere that you're speaking coming up in the fall or in the winter, or even Carol added some events that she's confirmed for next year where she's speaking, feel free to add those in and share with everybody. No news on JupyterCon, and the action items, feel free to add things in there that you would want to communicate out to the group or the community. We don't have anything new in there. And then the last section is kind of recapping our releases for last week, anything planned for this week, and anything that should be released soon in the next week or two. Please document and repeat anything from the notes above into this section so that it gets saved into the agenda. So with that, I think we'll close things out. I do want to give one more chance for anyone to add anything that you may want to share before we close out. Otherwise, Min, I will ask you to end the recording. Anything else before we go? Alrighty, thank you, everyone.